1986, the Terminus facility was set up and running after years of development, surveying and renovation. The once naval base and coal mining facility was now home to something much more sinister. A biological experimentation facility run by the headstrong and controversial Dr. Modi. Known for her biological work, Modi would stop at nothing to realize her ambitions. And what was her goal? To save humanity at any cost. Modi was given this island by Dr. Richtofen himself in the hopes that her research would contribute to the one primary goal of this test facility, which was to answer the following question: how do we regrow a fully functional human body from one single piece of DNA? This question was the whole reason Modi was on Terminus in the first place. She was there to get Richtofen answers. Whilst she also seems to have a crush on Richtofen and a deep lust for him, both being absolutely insane. Dr. Modi, although very dedicated to Richtofen, had goals of her own. She had just been given the keys to a castle, and she was going to use them. Her main ambition was to develop an ether-infused human who was strong and controllable enough to stop any major threat that the dark ether could bring humanity. She would traffic humans, force workers to do labor, and commit mass murder, all so she could realize her own dreams. She would have no time nor care for remorse, because any price paid for progress was worth it to her. Richtofen built this island, but she was the one who ruled it. She often ran the island with an iron fist, and would not hesitate to make an example out of any dissenter within her ranks. One of these dissenters was a man by the name of Owen Guthrie. Owen spent his days in the labs of Terminus, overseeing the inoculation of multiple test subjects. Going about his day, Owen was numb to the plight of the test subjects around him, opting to push away the guilt by seeing them as only serial numbers and experiments. He was a scientist committed to his work, who didn't often think about the ethical concerns of his experimentation on humans. It's unclear if Guthrie even knew what the main purpose of Terminus Island was. What was Project Janus's end goal? What was Guthrie's work actually contributing to? For now, Owen Guthrie kept his head down and focused on his work. A constant stream of patients came his way, and he was never without people to experiment on. This near endless supply of living test subjects was thanks to the members of the French Syndicate. A man by the name of Franco, who was directly employed by Richtofen himself to supply Terminus with its human subjects, a high-up figure in the organization, Franco would team up with other smugglers located near Terminus Island to run his operation. He would directly work with the Aguinaldo siblings Maya and Nathan, lifelong smugglers who seemed to primarily smuggle refugees. Both Maya and Nathan worked with Franco, but at the time only one of the siblings knew the true nature of their business relationship. Nathan originally sought the help of the French Syndicate to save more refugees, but in reality he would end up dooming them. Nathan took this deal without really consulting Maya, and would begin a working relationship with the Syndicate. In the night, when smuggling refugees, Franco would take a few of them and put them in a separate boat, presumably to ship them off to Terminus Island. It is unclear if they took a direct path to Terminus, or if they experienced other evils before making it to their grim destination. It seems the journey to Terminus could have even been worse than the island itself. Guthrie takes notice of this, and even says,
"At first all the subjects were just serial numbers with faces to me. I never really thought about them. And now I lay awake at night driving myself crazy over it, thinking about who they might have been before they were kidnapped or sold. Like livestock. By the time they reach us, they all have the same expression. It's almost like relief. Because none of them can think of anything worse than whatever nightmare they just lived through."
What happened to them before they arrived is unclear, but it seems the French Syndicate is just as cruel and brutal as the scientists on Terminus Island, maybe just in a different way. Either way, Terminus had no shortage of humans to experiment on. Guthrie was directly linked to the experimentations of these patients, even mentioning how he is responsible for the inoculation of these test subjects. He was the one who administered the treatment which would biologically alter live subjects, twisting them into unrecognizable horrors. He was the only one who would doom so many lives for Modi's ambitions. He was the man with his hand on the trigger. Since Guthrie was directly experimenting on the test subjects, he would most likely have a lot of contact with one of Terminus's main smugglers, Nathan Aguinaldo. The nature of their relationship is unknown, but Guthrie remarks on how he likes Nathan, implying that the two most likely have a good relationship. It seems Maya didn't know about Nathan's allegiance with the Terminus Island staff, but it seems over time she eventually figured it out, later finding the island with Dr. Peck. It is unclear if Nathan knew what was happening to the people he was smuggling, but it is clear he did work for Terminus directly, and over time, his once compliant attitude was whittled away. Nathan most likely realized what was happening to the refugees he was supposed to be saving. This would lead to Nathan's breaking point. On September 10th, 1990, Guthrie would see his friend in a prison cell. Guthrie was torn up by this, even saying,
September 10th, 1990. I saw Nathan in subject holding today. I like him a lot, but walking by his cell always ruins my day. I mean, the kid's been a smuggler most of his life. He probably thought he knew the worst of what humanity could offer. And then he ends up here and realizes he doesn't know shit. So I'm protecting him the best I can, but Modi's been sniffing around. Someone must have told her he was a troublemaker. And the problem is they aren't wrong. He fights back on everything. He won't take his meds. He won't sleep. He won't eat. Why can't he get that? That kind of shit puts everyone at risk. If he ain't careful, Modi will transfer him to the amalgam program. And that'll be the end of it. I've played it safe until now. Kept my head down. If I can't convince Nathan to do the same. Damn it. This is why I don't have friends.
Nathan would continue his unrest and disruptive nature, and ultimately, he would be assigned to the Amalgam program. A biological program which would end up distorting and twisting Nathan into a fleshy abomination with a loosening grip on his humanity. This would be the final straw that would eventually put Owen Guthrie on a path to destroy Dr. Modi. For once, he would no longer sit idle whilst these evils kept taking place. If he took down Modi, then he could possibly save hundreds, maybe even thousands of lives from these vile experiments. On October 23rd, 1990, Owen began spending his evenings gathering evidence on Dr. Modi. Fueled by his ever-growing disdain for Modi and her actions, Owen began to slowly grow his body of evidence against her. Modi was always watching, however, and Guthrie needed a safe space to gather his evidence. Within a derelict ship, on the outskirts of Terminus, Dr. Guthrie would discover a place to keep his plan secret, away from the prying eyes of Dr. Modi. Guthrie tried to piece together all of the information, opting to chat it out on the wall in his hidden room. He would read emails about the true purpose of the facility, finding out about other secret Janus operations, and even figure out that a bulk of the funding was directly from the French Syndicate in Avalon, France. During all of this, Guthrie would contact a freelance journalist to help him with his investigations. Who was GK? Could this be Gabriel Kraft? Seeing as he makes an appearance at the end of the Terminus Easter egg, somehow still alive after all of the years since Vanguard Zombies, who is said to be captured by Ravenov under this mob in Avalon. What was the Mansion facility? What was the Janus Towers facility? And what were Janus doing in regards to time travel? Guthrie started investigating all of these questions in depth. This task, however, was quite the undertaking, and Owen needed help from the outside world. Using the Terminus communication systems, he began to communicate with a man named Gerald. Gerald was going to be the reporter to break the case on this facility to the public. This information kept piling up over months and months and months of work, and Guthrie started to pull back the curtain on what Janus was up to. He got so far down the rabbit hole that he even felt it was necessary to try try and get his family into witness protection for their safety. What he knew could hurt everyone he held dear, not just himself. This was a risky move for Guthrie. Dr. Modi was known around the island for her iron fist. She would often request psyche evaluations of her staff to see if any of them were non-believers. Fostering a culture of paranoia and compliance was her modus operandi. Sole belief in her goal was the only option, and if you were a dissenter, you were surely going to pay the price. This was Modi's status quo, one dictated by fear rather than respect. She would often execute non-believers in front of the island's inhabitants, making an example out of anyone who crossed her, or put the project in jeopardy. If you didn't believe in the mission wholeheartedly, or doubted any judgments by Modi, then you might as well have signed your death certificate.
The job never used to be this hard. It's not like I took pride in my work, I just didn't think about it. Dr. Modi scheduled psych evals for the whole tech ops team. She says she wants everyone at their best. I think she's trying to flush out the non-believers. When everyone pops up, she makes sure they're dealt with. Out in public, where everyone can see. Honestly, if you're bent on maintaining order, fear tactics aren't a bad way to go. Maybe I can get reassigned.
Modi was no stranger to cruelty, and her cruelty was yet to reach its peak. Sometime after the prolonged experimentation on Nathan, Owen Guthrie would continue to grow his hatred towards Modi, biding his time until he had enough evidence to ruin her for good. Guthrie continued his experimentations begrudgingly, remarking on how his memory was starting to slip. He couldn't even remember the simple 3-digit code to Nathan's container anymore. It seems that all of the Ethereum he was around began to have its side effects. He began to get restless, unable to sleep, unable to remember. Just like 115, Ethereum has similar effects. Terminus was wearing him down. His plan was to transfer to another facility, present his evidence to the authorities, and end her tenure as the lead of Terminus. His transfer was eventually approved. His means of escape and justice was right within his reach. But Guthrie would never live to see his departure from Terminus Island. On the stormy island of Terminus, nothing stays hidden forever, and Guthrie's pile of evidence on Modi was no exception. According to a note on the wall of his evidence room, Dr. Modi was onto him. She had caught wind of someone using the communications network on Terminus, and it wouldn't be long before she connected the dots to Owen Guthrie. She might have already. Owen, writing his worst fear on the paper, theorized that Gerald could have identified him before he was killed. And if this were true, it meant that the Doctor was going to be next. The Terminus employees never got to say goodbye to Owen Guthrie. They would no longer see him in the cafeteria, no longer see him in the laboratory doing his rounds, no longer hear his voice, no longer share his company. At least that's what they thought. Dr. Modi, after catching Guthrie, forged documents and perpetuated the lie amongst the staff that Guthrie had transferred sites. She told them he was no longer on Terminus, but instead at a different Janus facility. This deceit assuaged the suspicions of fellow island residents, but little did the staff know they were actually closer to Owen Guthrie than they thought. In one of the many incubating pods, a new experiment was being conducted. An experiment on Dr. Owen Guthrie himself. Modi, at the height of her cruelty, injected Dr. Owen Guthrie with Ethereum and turned him and his body into a living biological experiment. Modi looked on at Guthrie with pride, because her biggest betrayer was now her most successful experiment. It's ironic that Guthrie, the man who was the one experimenting on subjects, became the most valuable subject in Modi's scientific arsenal. Guthrie was the longest surviving experiment, and the possible solution to Modi's final goal. It is unclear why he thrived where other subjects didn't, but it is mentioned by Dr. Modi that the psyche is just as much a part of Ethereum transformation as the physical component. Maybe his prolonged exposure over time to Ethereum built up his tolerance, or maybe his mind slipping helped him survive longer. Or maybe he survived out of spite, a willingness to endure more than the others, waiting to get his revenge on the one he hated so much. Regardless, we do not know how cognizant this new form of Owen was. Even Dr. Modi had no clue. However, just in case to throw salt on the wound, Modi placed Guthrie in a high-traffic area where he could see his colleagues and friends walk by every day. If any part of him was still alive in there, it was certainly being tortured.
Tying up the loose ends Guthrie left behind was a waste of time and resources. I'll admit I was surprised how much evidence he'd gathered before he was discovered. It's my own fault for becoming so lax, yet another reminder to always remain vigilant. Thankfully, his colleagues knew of his transfer request. When I told them it had been approved, they were sad he hadn't said goodbye. Funny, despite his best efforts to destroy my work, his very existence now supports the need for it. If he continues to endure, he might end up being the longest surviving subject in the program. I would no doubt come under some fire if anyone found out that one of our own was now being kept in a tank and fed table scraps. So I've redacted any mention of his employment here. I'm currently determining how sentient he is. Guthrie, Patient 13, hasn't spoken since the early phases of his transformation. I have him on display in a high-traffic area so he can watch his colleagues go about their day. It would be a shame if he was unaware of their presence.
Owen Guthrie existed in name no longer. There was only Patient 13. Over the next year, Patient 13 would continue to grow and twist into something unrecognizable. Arms would become tentacles, 2 eyes became several, a containment chamber became useless, and only the ocean was big enough to house this Leviathan's rage. The escape of the Requiem crew would cause shockwaves to the status quo of the island. The crew would see traces of this monster as they navigated Terminus, but the team would not know its true power yet. However, it wouldn't be long before they came face to face with the creature. After the crew figures out how to get Dr. Modi's submarine to surface, Patient 13 finally reveals itself to the crew. Its fleshy tentacles pierced through the murky water, wrapped around the submarine, and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed until the vessel was crushed. Patient 13 would be the only one to get Owen Guthrie's revenge. Stopping Modi was all Owen Guthrie wanted, and all it cost him was his humanity. Dr. Modi could no longer hurt anyone, and Patient 13 was the only one to carry out that justice. Attached to the submarine were 2 Ethereum inversion warheads, which were dredged up from the sea by Dr. Modi. But where did these warheads come from? Previously, Omega Group ran an operation called Operatia Inversia, or Operation Inversion in English. The goal of this operation was to end the Cold War once and for all by using advanced Ethereum weapons technology to give them a major advantage in the arms race. But what damage would they actually do? The purpose of the inversion warheads was seemingly to tear a veil between the 2 worlds, allowing a stronger Dark Ether connection to take place. Zykov wanted to manipulate Omega to free him, just as he manipulated Valentina. Omega Group, likewise to Requiem, did not know of Zykov's manipulation at the time. This operation was inevitably thwarted, however, by the efforts of Ravenov and Samantha Maxis during the first Outbreak quest in Black Ops Cold War Zombies. Right before the warheads were launched, a specialized Requiem strike team was able to divert their end destination to the dark depths of the Pacific Ocean, saving countless lives. Or so they thought. The warheads were developed by Dr. Peck, but what made them special was the warheads had living tempests mounted to them. This man named Zykov helped Peck from within the Dark Ether to make these weapons. He helped him because their creation could directly free him, potentially from the Dark Ether. In reality, Zykov was actually a powerful Dark Ether entity named the Forsaken, and his old identity had long since corrupted, despite him feigning innocence. If successful, the warheads would have ripped a hole in the veil, allowing the Forsaken to return to Earth. Despite these manipulations, even with Dr. Peck now aware of all of this, literally witnessing Zykov betraying them on DLC 4, he still sees these warheads as his own special creation, and repeatedly begs for them to return to him throughout the map. It seems to be all he cares about more than the safety of the other characters, due to his overwhelming narcissism and egomania. These weapons were the main reason the crew stayed on the island after finding Nathan. The warheads contained massive amounts of ether, energy, and unimaginable power capable of bridging worlds. When Patient 13 crushed the submarine, the Ethereum in the warhead supercharged his body. The formidable creature was now even more lethal and angrier than ever before. Ethereum was coursing through his body. Every blood vessel, every appendage, every ounce of its being was now stronger than ever before. Patient 13 would tower over the Terminus crew. Its body was now more resilient than ever. Its tentacles were now more durable than ever. The creature would sink under the water to avoid the attack, shift its weaknesses to mitigating damage, and unleash a barrage of poison down onto the docks below. Every weapon in its arsenal was on full display, trying to devour the Terminus characters. Maybe Patient 13 could have been the weapon Dr. Modi hoped for, but for now, we will never know. One thing we do know is that this fight was surely not going to be an easy one. After a grueling battle, countless close calls, thousands of bullets, and thousands of undead, Patient 13 was finally put to rest. On February 19th, 1991, the Terminus crew, Weaver, Gray, Carver, and Meyer, ended the now unrecognizable life that was Dr. Owen Guthrie's. This could be seen as an act of mercy by the crew. If part of him was still alive in there, it was surely glad to finally be at peace. Patient 13 was more than just a monster. He was a man who wanted to be better. A man who wanted to try and make up for his sins, his cruelty, and his own mistakes. A man who cared about the world and those around him. A man who's just another name in the long list of people that Janice has wronged. And that man's name was Owen Guthrie.